To all you happy campers out there, this is Casey. I got Mountain Bluebird here behind me, all queued up and ready for an oil change. So today I'm going to walk through how I do a really quick oil change on my 2016 Sprinter van. The 2016 Sprinter van, and four-wheel drive at least, only came in the 3-liter V6 diesel. I change the oil every 10,000 miles. I think is the appropriate oil change frequency. I'm going to go through changing that and how I do it really quickly and a lot cleaner, especially with the Van Compass engine skid plate, which does get in the way of the oil draining out, even though it does have a slot for it. So I'm going to show you how to do this really cleanly and quickly. And I'm also going to probably change out, I think, well, of course the oil filter, but I think I'm also going to change out the fuel filter this time as well. And I'm going to check the air filters, make sure that looks okay, and change it if it does need to be changed. So I'm going to give you a few little tips and tricks. And so hopefully this will help you out with your van conversion and maintenance on it. And I'll show you just kind of how easy it is really to do an oil change on these. And you can save yourself quite a bit of money because the dealer charges about $400 to $500 in oil change, and the parts, including all the oil, is about $120 to about $150 in total for both the oil and the fuel filter change. The air filter's easy, and the cabin air filter is extremely easy. That can be done in about less than a minute, actually less than about 20 seconds, and extremely cheap and easy to do. So those are things you can do yourself and save yourself quite a bit of money over paying somebody else to do those. So anyways, let's get going. Okay, number one, when you do an oil change, have your all of your things handy. I have a packet of some nitrile gloves here to keep my hands clean, so I don't get oil and stuff on them. Or when I do, just simply toss these into the trash. So that certainly helps keep yourself clean. Certainly wear some dirty work clothes, of course. Right now I'm actually sitting on a creeper, a crawler, vehicle creeper crawler, which definitely helps. I've got a set of paper towels. Whoop, there they are. A whole roll of paper towels here handy, because inevitably there's going to be a little bit of a drip or a spill here and there. And then here's the other quick little tip I'm going to give you. I replaced the factory drain plug, oil drain plug on the oil pan of the engine with a valve. And it's I think a Famuto. I can certainly put a link in the comments of this video. But it's fantastic. It replaces the oil drain plug. It screws in there. It's got a valve with a safety catch on it, and that safety catch keeps it in the locked position. And I got one with a barbed hose end on the end. There's a couple of options you can get with those, and then what I can do is put just a piece of rubber hose. This is actually rated for oil, but really any rubber hose will work. I reuse this one. That's what I was just doing as you're pulling the tape from. I just keep it taped up at the ends so it doesn't, any little bit of residual oil doesn't leak out. And I simply just push this on the barbed end, and then I put the other end into my can of oil, the container of oil that came from my last oil change, or it came with my last oil change. I always keep a couple of those larger gallon-sized ones handy, and then I can just simply put this right in there and fill it up. So let me show you. Okay, so here's my hose right here. My rubber hose is connected into the oil drain valve. I simply put it in the old container right here, and I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around so I can see the window, so we can see the oil draining in. And I'm simply going to open this valve up, and there it is. It's open. It should now be draining in, filling into here. And it's probably going a little bit slowly because I haven't opened up the filler cap on the oil filler cap or anything else. So there's not a lot of air coming in, but I can see it filling up down here. So that's exactly what we want. We're filling up, and you can see it's going to take a while for this to fill up. So while this is doing that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the oil filter and just get that changed out right now. And so now we're going to go back up on top side, and meanwhile every few minutes I'll just come down and check this, and when this is getting full I'll just simply close the valve. Right now it's right about to here, so about a quarter of a quart, and so when it's getting full I'll just go ahead and close the valve. put a towel, paper towel, in the end of the hose, so any little drips of oil stay in that towel and not get on the garage floor here. I'll go ahead and just pull another container over from the last oil fill. Have one handy right here, and I'll just move the hose over that one, open the valve back up, and start filling that one up. Clean, no mess, simple, easy. Right here's the Van Compass engine skid plate, and you can see no problem at all working right around that. Okay, so now we're back on the top side. Here's what I'm going to do. Because I'm going to change out the fuel filter this time, I need to remove the air filter cleaner box, and I also need to get to the oil filter, which is right here. I can get to that without removing the oil filter box, but because I'm going to change the fuel filter anyways, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the air filter box. So there's a little clip underneath that holds in the positive battery terminal for when you need to jump start your vehicle from. That's always good to know. That's what this red thing is. You open that up, and there's your, as a safety, to cover up your positive battery terminal. So you just connect that. There's a little connector over here, a hose clamp to disconnect the intake hose going into from our air filter in. So we want to make sure into our engine, so we'll make sure we keep that clean. And then there's a few little wire connections here, and be very careful to make sure to push the clips in, the retainer clips in, and remove those two wires over here for the air filter sensors. And then there's a little bit of a button right here you can push in, and that kind of releases this plastic, which of course happens to be very stubborn today. There we go. This little piece of plastic you just put right back in its spot. This is where it takes the air from the front of the vehicle, puts it into the air filter box, and pop that out. And now this whole air filter box, boom, done. We can remove that. And I'm just going to set this aside for now. And we're going to check the air filter later. That's going to be really easy to change that now. And while we're here, I can just inspect everything, make sure it looks good. No oil leaks or other visible leaks of any kind. Everything looks good and solid. And now it's much more easy to get to the fuel filter, which is right down here. But while I'm here, before I even change the fuel filter, I am going to go ahead and change the oil filter. In order to do that, we simply need an oil filter wrench. This one is made for various different vehicles, so make sure you get the right one for Mercedes. And it simply just goes into a 3/8 inch ratchet. I've got on a little swivel extension right now, which I actually don't really need because this is so easy to change from top side here with the air filter box off. But I'm just going to gently start unscrewing it. And I'm going to go kind of easy here because the threads on this are relatively small. And maybe what I can do, I don't know if I can put the camera in place so you can see this better, but let me go and hold it up so you can see what's going on here. So this is all I'm doing, is simply just lightly unthreading this, and I can see that I'm pretty much unthreaded now. I don't need the wrench on there anymore. Swabbling a little bit so I can get that off. So I got the oil filter wrench off, and now what I can do is remove the oil filter. And all that is, it's a pretty simple little filter here. And even before I remove it, I'm going to go ahead and get the new oil filter all ready, so we can just take the old one out, put it right in the trash, wrap it in a couple paper towels, keep the residual oil from dripping around, put it in the trash, and then we're just going to put a new one right in there after we clean that up. So let me just go ahead and remove this, and I'll show you how this works. There is the canister right there for the oil filter. A couple paper towels so we can very gently and carefully remove the oil filter, and I'm just going to hold it right here over the canister because oil is still dripping out of the oil filter, and so just to keep that oil from dripping all over the engine bay or anything, just going to hold it here for a few minutes is why I've got paper towels and also my rubber gloves on. And now it looks like I've gotten most of that oil out of there. Okay, I just took my oil filter out of the box, brand new one, and I simply just slip it right in there. But what we need to do is we need to go and replace the O-rings that are on this. There's a little tiny one here, and a larger one that goes around this lip here, and those can be pretty tricky to remove. So I'm going to carefully get a little little hook pin that I can remove those and pop the new ones in that come with the oil filter. So I'm going to do that right now, but before I do that, I'm going to go change out, turn off the valve on the oil drain and turn that off, take the hose and put it from the now nearly full oil past oil container and put it to the new one, and so we can keep this oil keep draining on out while we're changing this out. Okay, so in order to remove these old O-rings, rubber O-rings, one way to do it is to use a little hook tool to hook them and pull them on out. They're very small. It's kind of a pain to do. It's a pain to do without damaging them, but nonetheless, that's how I remove them. And then you can pop the new one on. And I like to do one at a time. So I'm going to do this little one right now, and then I'm going to go do the big one. So certainly don't want to use the hook tool or anything else that's sharp on the fresh one. There's the new one on there now. And what I'm going to do before I put this back on with the oil filters, I'm going to put a little bit of oil around that ring just to help it seal and go on easily. Now the bottom one here is the trickier one because you always have residual oil that's sitting around, and you can see it actually dripping a little bit right now. So I'm going to wipe that up. I'm going to carefully use this hook to pull up this O-ring. And while doing this, I'm going to really look at where this is right now on here to make sure I get the new O-ring in exactly that same spot. Okay guys, here we go again. I'm just going to start. I already started to remove this O-ring, and you can see where it has this little recess that sits in there. It's not at the very bottom with this oil filter. It's got kind of its own groove just below the bottom of the threads. And so I just use this little hook tool, not to puncture the O-ring, just in case for some reason I have to reuse it, but simply just to kind of wrap around there and gently pull it up, and that way I can pull it off here. I can set it down. I can grab the new one and put it down into that same spot. Make sure to keep these clean, because obviously this is your oil. You don't want this getting into your engine. And just gently go all the way around to work it in to that groove at the bottom of the threads, but not at the very bottom of this filter canister. Now that's in that spot, now what we can do is simply take this oil filter I've had sitting in there. This is the fresh new one, and push it into that. And now check that O-ring again, make sure that's good. I'm going to take just a little bit of oil and just go around this O-ring just so that it has a little bit of oil on it so it can seal, not have too much stiction as it goes on. And now I'm going to go and get that oil wrench, because my hands are greasy with a little bit of oil here. I'm going to go get that oil wrench and put that on and tighten this up. So now that the oil filter's in its canister, it's pushed down in there. Now I'm just going to gently by hand get the oil filter top started. I'm going to make sure we're not in any way cross-threading this. So just gently screwing it on. Right now you can't quite see, but it's about 3/4 of the way screwed on. And I'm just going to keep screwing it till it gets almost all the way on, and then I'm going to put the wrench on it and tighten it up. And I'm going to go kind of gentle here, just to again make sure nothing's cross-threaded, everything feels good, and just go until it's basically tight, which is right now, and just a little bit more. That's it. Doesn't need to be too tight at all. And that's it. Now we can do is just wipe up any little bit of residual oil so it stays nice and clean, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. And we'll go on to the next step. Okay, happy campers, here we go once again. So I just want to point out something. So I've got my final bottle from my last oil fill in there, and I've already filled up 2, and the reason why is because These are 5 quarts each, and the Sprinter holds, I believe, 13 quarts. So I just flipped my valve there, if you can see that. Oil's gonna start draining and filling this up. This last one always takes quite a bit longer. It's only about 2 or 3 quarts that are in there. And I've already changed out my oil filter with the 2 new O-rings in there, so that's done. Now I'm going to change out the fuel filter, which is right here. It's under, obviously, the air filter box. It's got these 2 hose clamps on it. They could also have kind of more of a spring clamp, depending if they're the factory spring clamps. I've since replaced them with some hose clamps. It's got this little connector here that pops off, an electrical connector that comes off pretty easily. The tricky part is you can see there's also a fuel line right here that has this little clip right here, and when you pull the fuel filter out, it just slides up and out, but it's tight in here, really tight. You have all these hoses and things that are in the way. This hose right here is the one that's really, you have to be careful of, because it's got this really easy to break plastic T connection here. And so what I like to do is remove this clip right here. That's hard to see, but I remove this clip. I remove this hose up out of the way. A few drips of fuel, diesel fuel, is going to drip there. I'll put a towel under there to catch that. And that way that's out of the way, and I'm not likely then to break this plastic T connection. And I'm speaking to you there from experience. The other really tricky part is the clip that's on this right here. It is tricky as well. Mercedes like to make these things incredibly more tricky than they need it to be. They're not user friendly. So it's a bit of a bummer, but that little clip, there's some other videos on YouTube and stuff that go over kind of dealing with that, but I'll try to give you some tips if I can as I'm going through this, but it's hard to hold the camera and try to work in here at the same time. So I'm going to point out those things, and then once those are disconnected, this filter removes, a new one simply slides into place, and all these different little connections just clip right up to it. Make sure obviously you get your connections right for your for your fuel lines, so you can keep that consistent. All right, and then once we put that in there, we can then change our fuel filter, or air filter, check it, make sure it's good, and put that back, the air filter box back on, and then we are done with our oil and fuel filter, and at least checking the air filter, which often doesn't need to be replaced, except probably about every somewhere between 20 and 40,000 miles. At least that's what I've seen. Even driving in fairly dusty conditions, it just doesn't really bring in that much dust. But it's good to check it about every 10 to 20,000 just to replace it if you do. It's very inexpensive, and so it's easy to keep one on hand and just replace it as needed. So there you go. You notice one thing here, just as a tip, I've got different needle nose pliers and things like that here handy to remove these clips. I've also got my thing here to loosen up my hose clamps, which I already started to loosen up. So just have all your tools and things handy. You can see I've got rubber gloves on. Just keep any fuel and oil off my hands. And I'm also going to bring up a couple paper towels so as I do this, and just kind of take your time and take things methodically. Don't try to force something. Go easy on it, because it is easy to break some of these little parts. So I'm going to wrap up here in a little bit with a couple more tips and the rest of the oil filter change. Okay, back here again. So I want to point out a couple tips. So there's the 2 fuel lines that are on these rubber fuel lines are on these barbed ends here. I undid those hose clamps. Like I said, I replaced mine with regular hose clamps instead of the factory pinch clamps, which are just a lot easier to deal with, especially on a recurring basis, maintenance. Just make sure you get the right size and tighten them down just the right amount. So I went ahead and undid those. They're not easy. I use a screwdriver to pry on the filter here and push that rubber hose back as I'm pulling on it. It's very tight, cramp in here, space to work, but I pull those off. Then I can lift the fuel filter out. Now I can more easily get to the wire connection here, and also this connection here in the end, and I'll use my little, again, pry tool that I showed you before. You can use some other things. You just get in here, grab this little clip that's in here, and gently pull that up so I can unclip this. So I'm going to put the camera down now so I can do those, but that's just one tip, is to remove the fuel filter. Just slides up and out once you remove these 2 fuel rubber fuel lines that kind of hold it down in place, and then it's easier to get to these other 2 attachments in here. And another point, tip, is these electrical connections from Mercedes are incredibly brittle. They are difficult to use. They're not actually very self-explanatory as to how they unclip. unlike a lot of other brands. So be careful kind of as to how you get your a screwdriver or something in there to undo it, because you can break these fairly easily, so you don't want to do that. So just make sure you're kind of careful with that and don't pry too hard. Now, okay. All right, so I went ahead and I've replaced the fuel filter, the fuel filter, and so it's right here. And I went ahead and I tightened up my hose clamps, and again I pulled the fuel filter out after I removed these two hoses here and by loosening those hose clamps. Pulled it out so I get to this clip easily enough, and also this clip here. Very careful, this little plastic clip. My fuel filter that I ordered did come with a replacement of this, which is great, but they're easy to lose, and they're easy to break. And again, what I do is I remove this metal clip right here of this little fuel T, remove this and pull this whole line out of the way. So that way there's no risk of breaking that when trying to pull out the fuel filter here. As you can see, it's right in the way of that. This little hose here can kind of just separate and come out of the way. Okay, so I went ahead and opened up my air filter box. This is the engine air intake, and it simply separates into two sections. It's got these T25 screws around the top that are captive on the top portion. When I pulled it out, the air filter was it was a little bit dirty, and so was the box. So I went ahead and just shook the box out, so I get all that debris, leftover remnants of bugs and things like that are in there, and the dirt and stuff accumulated. And it wasn't terribly dirty, but it was dirty enough to say, let's just go and replace it. This is about a $20 filter. It's pretty cheap to replace, and of course it'll help not only retain power at those higher RPMs, and also just help get a little better fuel economy too. The engine won't work as hard. So pardon me here, I'm just going to put the camera down, and I'm going to simply put these clips back in on the back of this box, and then simply just tighten these down. And again, it's just a T25 torque screw. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these around the box. I can just go ahead and get these tightened down. Again, they're nice and captive at the top here, and so fairly easy to hold those screws in so they're not lost. And just go ahead and go around and get these tightened in, and then we're going to go ahead and put this box right back on, which is real easy. Now that we have the fuel filter changed, we can put this back on. So we got a fuel filter change, we have an oil filter change, and now we have also the engine air filter changed. And we'll just add the two electrical clips when we put this back in, and the two connections, and we'll have this. Okay, here we are back on top side. I'm just going ahead and check all my connections once again, make sure everything's connected up, everything looks good. I've got my electrical connections for this set aside, and I'm going to go ahead and simply connect that in. Make sure this wire connection for the jump is set aside. There's two little kind of bars here that this essentially hooks into in the back there. And before we get that totally hooked in, let's hook in also the air intake here, plugged in, pushed into its places. There we go, that's snapped in, that's snapped in. Let's get the jump positive for the jumping the vehicle, push and snap back into place. Check all of our wires, they're good, they're solid. All the screws in there, and now these two little wires, we're just simply going to push back in until they click, and make sure those are good connections. There we go, clipped and clipped, done. So now we've got fuel filter below this, air filter here on top. Now I'm going to start adding my oil back in, but before I do that, let me just show you what we have going down here as far as oil change. What I've done now is I filled up 3 of these containers. This is about my last one. You can see it's right full to about there. So it's about a little more than half full. And I'm going to shut off my valve that's back here. So that valve is shut off. This has been draining for quite some time now. So it should be quite well drained out. And I'm going to show you how nice and super clean this is. Let me just set the camera down. And I'm simply going to pull out this hose, because in this hose was sitting in a little bit of oil inside the fuller containers, and I'm simply going to pull it off from here, and that's it. I am done. And I don't know if you probably can't see that, but there's not a single drip of oil anywhere, and that is it. So I have my 3 containers. They are full of oil and not a single drip of oil anywhere. So super nice and clean. That's it. They're all back in their previous oil containers. Now I can take these down to the oil recycling, which is really any automotive parts store will be able to recycle your oil for you. And that's a free service. And so now for about $120 to $150 in parts, changed an air filter, engine air filter, engine fuel filter, engine oil filter, and the oil, and probably about 45 minutes of time. So far more efficient than probably paying a dealer about $500 to do this. Having that oil drain valve replaced when you do this the first time to replace the oil drain plug significantly improves and cleans this up, and I think it's my biggest recommendation for any kind of maintenance you're doing on your van, especially something you're doing every 10,000 miles. So I'll provide a link to that in the notes below, and certainly hope this was helpful. Y'all have a good day. Get out there and camp, and certainly let me know any comments or questions you have below, and certainly subscribe. I'll keep providing more, and let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know about, and I'll certainly provide some more information and videos on this in the future. All right, bye now.